Hello. What an exciting, packed day you all are embarking on. And I know you have been stretched and challenged and have learned in so many different ways. And so take a deep breath. I let you guys have a moment to resettle. So in this I don't know exactly what we're calling it, breakout. I'll be going a little bit deeper into developmental relationships. So, in the keynote, I talked about developmental assets, developmental relationships, and how developmental relationships are an integral part of that development of the assets. And so, I'll go a little bit deeper into what developmental relationships are, what some of the data says, and hopefully give you some ideas around how you can be more intentional and really forge the ground you want to forge around developmental relationships and those five key components. So I'll tell you a little bit more about Search Institute. Search Institute is a Minnesota-based nonprofit that has been around for, I believe, 60 years. And in that, we came about because there was so much talk about young people, but everything was from a very negative perspective. It was, oh, adolescence is such this horrible time of life. And our kind of founders and early stage researchers were like, but there actually is so much opportunity associated with adolescence. Adolescence isn't all bad. It isn't a stage of life that you just have to rush through, that there's a lot of promise that can come in adolescence. So they were the founders of this movement called positive youth development, which is the way that I was trained was that, yes, young people have immense strengths. And there are also a number of things that can get in the way of those strengths, sort of what we've been talking about. So how do you develop resilience as a strength as opposed to just looking at young people as being weak and not having enough? So those are just kind of the two sides of the same coin. The side that I tend to operate out of, and the founders of our organization, is the strength side. It's like, yes, there's a lot of things going on in the world and a lot of things that may be not functioning properly in young people, but how do you use those strengths to shore up those weaknesses? So we do research. We then apply that research and how to promote the factors we want to see. We consider how do we advance equity? How do we give each and every young person what they need in order to thrive ultimately? So over the years, we have surveyed over 6 million young people. This is wild to think about. We've done over 10,000 organizations throughout the United States that we've trained, and we have trained over 65,000 practitioners like yourselves who were thinking, how do I do this better? How do I be more intentional? So there in the middle, Search Institute, the intersection between youth voice, research science, and practitioner wisdom. We sit right there in that middle space. And it is our goal to amplify all of those and to also look at how they each feed into one another. So today, I'll be talking about what does it mean to be rooted in relationships, going a bit deeper based on what I was talking about in the keynote. We'll discuss why relationships matter. You don't need to know, you already know. I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know around why relationships matter, but we'll talk about what it looks like in the data. And we'll talk more about the developmental relationships framework and your relational ecosystem. Okay, so these are kind of building out from the keynote, giving you some more practical tools to go more deeply into what we were talking about earlier. So this idea of rooted in relationships, I talked about this in the keynote, and I'll go a little bit slower around this. So there you see again are the roots. The roots are the relationship. Our young people are growing, and they're growing in ways that are deeply connected to one another and to the rest of us. So the developmental relationships are the root that help to foster the positive outcomes, the young person we want to see. The relational climate is the soil. the richness of the soil, how are we feeding the roots that lead to developmental relationships, and that's at the one level, right? A level that's more close connected to the relationships. And then even deeper, the bedrock is the supporting structures. Where do they exist? What are the schools looking like? What is the community programs, the out of school time activities, all of the spaces in which young people are growing and developing in those structures, those are the supporting structures. What do they look like? I'll go zoom back up over to relational climate. Are the people in their lives consistent? Are they building spaces of belonging and safety? That's relational climate. Now, the way these three areas intersect is let's just snapshot again to a school, right? A school is this place of supporting structure, whether, schools fully embrace that or not. It's kind of a, I don't know, are we supposed to be doing that? Kids spend so much time there, there's no way you can look at a school as being anything but a supporting structure. So within that supporting structure, are they thinking about the belonging of young people? And if a whole school, as I mentioned in the keynote, my son goes to a school that is very heavily invested in relationships across all dimensions, including the eighth grader who can connect with the kindergartner. So that's deeply a part of their relational climate. So as a school, they are providing a supporting structure for relationship that then feeds the soil of the relational climate, which is that everyone is thinking that relationships are the best thing for our young people, which then feeds into the developmental relationships. So that's now, like I said, eighth grader to kindergartner, teacher to student, all of these cross relationships all building in to help develop the young person and the positive outcomes we want to see. And so I'm just kind of going backwards here. It's just, the little thing has a little box just going a long way. And so community context. So these are, again, we talked about the supporting structures, for example, right? The community context is really our world, right? What are the things that are happening in our world? I think about the pandemic, for example. The pandemic was something that we all experienced. I mean, around the world. And think for generations to come, people will talk about that time in life. That is a community context. That's something that's happening in the ether. Did that affect relationships? Yeah, it did. It changed people. It changed families. So these are things that are happening sort of, although not directly connected to relationships in the same way the supporting structures or relational climate is, but it's still affecting the overall. So that may be something like, okay, well, what may be happening? Are we seeing an increase in trafficking and exploitation? Are we seeing an increase in online behaviors? Those types of things could be a part of the community context. And so sometimes when you're thinking about targeting, you may target at different levels depending on what may be working or not working. And so when I tell folks, I'm like, sometimes you've got to look at all of it. You see that young person, you see that tree, there's so much going on underneath the surface that's impacting how they're developing. Why do relationships matter? Again, I don't need to tell y'all this. You know relationships matter. That's why you're here. That's why this is important. But there are so many layers to why relationships matter that I think are important to uncover. So let's take a moment and let's talk about relational assumptions. How might people have these various assumptions around relationships? When you think about relationships, what do you think that means? Take a moment, maybe talk amongst yourselves. What assumption do you have about relationships, what they are, what they're meant to do, kind of anything across the board? And just take a moment and share amongst yourselves, and then we'll share back afterwards. Connection.
Permanency or non-immutable, that they change over time.
Yeah, that they change over time. Good. Yeah, that's awesome. Yes. No, you're good. Vulnerability. Yeah, vulnerability. Relationship does take vulnerability. Anyone else? Yeah. We could do that. Or shout out and I can hear you.
We talked about how a natural assumption of relationship is that it's mutual. I like
Ah,
you, you like me,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But the reality is, I might like you, you might not like me.
Right. Thank you for that. Yes. And I'm glad that you highlighted something because so far we've been talking about the really positive components of relationship. But there's a lot of nuances there too. A lot of things that can complicate relationships, a lot of things that if we don't consider, we could find ourselves in really, unfamiliar territory. Like, oh, is this reciprocal or not? Like, I think we're in a relationship. And then what level of relationship is this? So it can get real complicated real fast. Anyone else wanna
Cultural implications.
tell me more? Yeah.
Well, we were discussing that American society, a little bit more independent, sufficient. So when we talk relationship versus, another culture, they might see relationship very differently.
That's a really good point. For some, there isn't much separation in relationship between family, right? So meaning like, if even if you're across the way neighbor, I still see you as family. And in American culture, they may be like, no, you're not family, you're the neighbor, and there being some distinction. So knowing what relationship means for one person versus another is really important. Yeah, good. Transactional. Yeah, tell me more.
Something like we expect something out of that relationship.
Mm,
That is a way to show that there is care or,
mm.
some sort of connection or like
Do you want a mic?
consideration.
Yeah. Yeah. That there's some sort of a give and take, or
Yeah.
it's almost like something like the reciprocity, something that's happening between us, even. Now, going further through these questions, so these are all, what assumptions can, or beyond what assumptions, how might those assumptions hinder folks? Having an idea about what relationships are, how can that get in the way of fill in the blank? Yeah.
So, yeah, just, I always say use a mic.
All right.
So I think one of the things, I get out of the speaker, one of the things would be is that you have this assumption that is a relationship is permanent or it's extreme or it's a loving relationship and you're not. Or with a parent, you assume that no matter what, they'll love you unconditionally forever. And sometimes we take those assumptions about parental love and anything I do is okay, and bring them to outside relationships. And of course, friends aren't not necessarily as tolerant and forgiving for in perpetuity as your parents or other family might be.
Yeah. No, that's wow. You highlighted something that young people in particular are attempting to navigate, right? It's like, okay, so I have been a part of a family unit. Let's say again, imagining we're talking about a loving family, right? We know that there's lots of different families, but I'm a part of this family unit that has been loving, caring, unconditionally of me when I've been my worst and my best. And then they're moving from that to spaces where they're now trying to forge new connections, new branches of friends, of new relationships that are beyond sort of the prescribed ones that are in their family. And that can be really tricky to navigate because now it's like, okay, oh, you like me, but do you like me? But maybe you like me. I think we're good. I think we're on it. It can be really complicated for young people to process that at so many different levels. And part of it is they will make mistakes. I think this is the one piece that when I talk with folks, I think people presume that adolescence at its best means there's nothing that goes wrong. Like there's no, and as a parent, and mine are little, I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like every week there's something new, something new I have to navigate, something new I have to help them navigate. And that's no different in adolescence. And because relationships are so critical to our development throughout our lifespan, but because adolescence in particular is associated with the level of independence, it can get really tricky and really hard to navigate some of those nuances and complicated pieces of relationship. And so I'll move on from there, but I think you guys are getting the point that relationships are complex and they can be navigated well for young people when they're met with adults who get it, right? So again, adolescence, childhood, our development is not free of complicated factors. It's not free of difficulty. And hopefully, the young person is being connected to an older person and a wise individual who's been there, done that, right? It's like, I think we can all probably look back on our adolescence and be like, oh yeah, I remember those years when I was trying to navigate, am I hippie, am I goth, am I whatever it is that you're trying to navigate in your own identity and the relationships and the friends that you forged, and then you see this young person, you're like, yep, you were right where I was. And so to be able to intervene and interconnect with them at that stage and knowing what you've been through, that's a huge selling point for young people to want to connect with you when you can say like, oh yeah, I've been there and I've done that, because there's so many difficult things that will be happening for them. So here, let's go through some relational assumptions. That relationships are just about caring. No, give me more than that. Relationships are just for families. No. Relationships are just one way. I think I heard someone say that. And relationships happen equally for every young person. That one right there, all because a young person is at a school, and maybe you've got 1,000 kids at that same school, doesn't mean that they're all experiencing relationship the same way. Some students can go to school, have their 6 teachers, experience all 6 of those teachers as great and amazing. Same kid, different kid, same school, experiencing 6 teachers, maybe even the same teachers, completely different. Because some kids, and we talk about equity, because some kids need more. Maybe that kid came from a broken home, a foster system. Maybe they never had anyone who's shown them love. So just getting a hello class, turn to page 54 in your textbook. All right, class, I'll see you next week. That being the depth of their interaction in a classroom may not be enough for one kid. Another kid would be like, oh yeah, Mr. Jones was amazing. He welcomed us to class. We opened our book and we left at the end of the day. I'm good. For another kid, it's like, another adult who could really care less about me. So that's something to think about, because often folks will be like, well, we're doing so much for all these kids. But are you doing enough for the kids who may be on the margin, who may not have received any kind of care? Those kids may need a bit more. So here's a quote from our senior director at Search Institute, Joanna Williams, who says, thriving is something that's not the responsibility of the individual youth to figure out. And it's not something that any of us can do alone. So thriving is deeply connected to relationships. That goes back to that statement I made earlier about the cape, right? You are not superheroes. You're never meant to be superheroes. That cape should be the size of this room. To cover all of the people that need to be a part of what is required to help young people. Not a solo endeavor, a multi-person, multi-institute working together to help young people. So here's some data for all you like me who like numbers. So here you'll see a series of bar charts. So the question was, youth who report strong developmental relationships also tend to report greater outcomes. And here are 3 different types of outcomes. So you'll see where the young people are showing high levels of developmental relationships. They're showing also signs of strong social emotional competence, right? So that's compared to weak DRs or moderate DRs. So the higher that they are, the more social emotional competence. Academic motivation, the more of those DRs they're experiencing goes up pretty high. Same with civic skills. So this is civic development, their belief in getting involved in things that are happening in their world and their community. Again, developmental relationships much higher for those young people. And so these are components that are also within the developmental assets that we talked about earlier. These are things that are strong for young people that lead to positive outcomes. And you'll see again that the developmental relationships are a huge lever in developing those core understandings of who they are that lead to more academic motivation, the social emotional competencies, the ability, which is ultimately part of the ability to navigate and to be resilient, to be aware of what's happening in their world, to not be susceptible to predators. So less than half of young people report experiencing a strong developmental relationship with an adult. Again, we're not just talking, I guess, again, young people experiencing a relationship is great. But what we're saying is that a developmental relationship is much stronger than just a regular relationship. This goes deeper. That's why we talked about the assumptions, because we can assume, oh, there's this thing that's happening between us. That's good. But what we're saying is like, no, there's a thing that happens between you that also has some 5 critical elements a part of it. So when those young people aren't reporting a strong relationship, 46% less than half report having the strong relationship. That means that's a whole lot more who aren't. So what you then have to wonder, when I hear those numbers, you could be like, oh, yay, great. That's almost 50%, 50-50 are. It's like, oh, but wait, who's not experiencing relationships here? What young people are missing? Because there's a lot then, based on that data, that says that there is something missing, which makes that young person vulnerable. So having that equitable access to relationship, consideration of the context and the barriers, and think about the changing of behaviors and systems. How do we be the people that percentage of young people who aren't having developmental relationships, how do we be what they need? How do we create institutional structures and eliminate barriers to access for relationship? So nearly 80% of programs and school staff say they are personally invested in relationships. That's awesome. That's most people in most spaces, and particularly in schools or after-school programs, who are like, yes, we are super invested. But here's what the kids are saying. Or the organization is saying that, oh, no, we're only about 41% invested. And the kids are saying even less. There's always a gap. Kids, oh, yeah. The kids are like, which I don't have on this slide, but the data that shows what adults are believing and what kids are receiving, there's a huge gap. I want to say the kids are at like a 30-something% compared to what the adults think they are. So adults are like 80% of it, and kids are like, oh, maybe like 30. But from an organizational level, which is also important, because what that's telling us is that, remember we talked about that supporting structure? So you're out there trying to forge relationship with a young person, sometimes within institutions that aren't prepared for that. Perhaps you have classroom sizes that have 40, 50 kids in them. That makes relationships really hard. Not impossible, but makes it really hard. And if then the structure is saying, well, what's important to us is our numbers, our metrics, or academic scores, or anything else, if that's what their priority is, then that may mean that relationships, they're not quite understanding how relationships are connected to those same things. And so relationships are a major lever for all the things that we want to see, reducing vulnerability being one, but also increasing the positive, right? So if you remember, during the keynote, I asked you to take a moment and think about who was that person who was there for you. So maybe we can take a moment now where you can share or take a moment to re-reflect. Who was that person for you? What did they say or do that helped you to feel seen, heard, valued, and safe? Get real into the granular. What did they do specifically that helped you to feel as if you were seen, heard, valued, and safe? Okay? You talk amongst yourselves. I hope those conversations were good. Anybody want to share out? Come back and who was there for you? You want to name some names? How about just take a moment and everybody like share out a name? Just say it all at once. 1, 2, 3. There's lots of names. That's awesome. So for me, as a kid growing up, I was like super sassy, hard to believe, right? Super sassy. I often talked out of turn and was a smart aleck because I like knew everything. And I don't want to say I got in trouble, but I was, when the teacher is talking, she doesn't want people interrupting her all the time. Like that was me. And so like that, that one in my school was like a little box, like student is, well behaved and on track. It was like, no, you're not getting that one checked. And through all of that, that sassiness and everything else, there was a teacher who saw so much more than just sass. So she she's like, here's some more books. Read about this. Explore that. And I was come back to her like, okay, I read all those books. Give me more. And so she kept feeding that. And I felt so seen as a kid who was also getting in trouble because I couldn't sit still. And that was so important to me. How about for you? How did it make you feel to feel seen? Yes, in the back. Encouraged, yeah. I love what I heard Kendra say in her plenary, which was right before, when she said, like, be so excited that you light up when that young person enters the room. That's how they feel seen. They feel seen when their head is down and you come to them and you say, hey, there are brighter days on the horizon. Huh? You noticed my head was down. Yeah, I could tell. That's not how you normally enter in here. Feeling seen for any of us, whether we're young people or who we are right now, is so valuable. But know that feeling seen can look different in any given moment for any kid's life. Because, yeah, okay, I picked up my head, but you didn't ask me about this other thing, or we're not that closely connected. You just asked one question. Some kids need a little bit more. So I'll talk about this developmental relationships framework and go through each of those different elements. So as I talked about what this means earlier, I'll give you the full definition. Close connections through which young people discover who they are, cultivate abilities to shape their own lives, learn how to engage and contribute to the world around them. And there's those 5 key elements there, which are hard to see, but don't worry, I'll go through each one. And what I want to make clear is that within those elements, you may be thinking like, oh my gosh, I have to be all those things all the time to every kid. You may have a particular strength in your ability to challenge growth or share power. That's great. You may not be so great at expressing care. And that's okay, because you're doing your best and you're trying to be intentional, and that's important. And know that, as I said before, that great cape of many, many people underneath it, someone hopefully within your system can carry the load when you can't for that young person, can be that extra support that they may need, who may have a different lens of seeing a young person. So please don't feel like you're like, oh, I got to do all of these things. I got to do them all the time. Really, what young people are experiencing when they experience a strong developmental relationship is a net positive. Just like anyone who's ever heard in parenting, good enough parent, be good enough, don't cause harm, your kids will be okay. It's the same for caregivers. You don't have to be perfect. You have to be good enough and try your best. And young people, they receive that. The other piece I also say is just be humble. When you make a miss, when you miss the mark, being able to be like, yo, I totally missed that. I find myself saying that a lot these days with my young kids, where I'm like, you know what? I think I might have yelled. And I know we talked about not yelling. That's my bad. I should not have done that. Because being corrective is a part of developing strong relationships. Being able to say, I'm wrong, being able to model saying, I'm wrong, gives them an opportunity to model the same thing. You feel safe when you are humble. When you can admit fault, when you can say, I've done something wrong, then it helps them to say, you know what, so have I. Particularly as in the conversations we're having, in the ways in which folks may be interacting online and in other spaces, that again, being young is about making mistakes. Hopefully it doesn't cost them their life. Hopefully it doesn't lead to trauma. But if something does go wrong, you want to be that person that they can go to. So in each of these elements, the first one, express care. What does it mean to express care? A young person receives that as, you can be someone that I can trust. That you really pay attention when we're together. You make me feel known and valued. You show me you enjoy being with me. You praise me for my efforts and achievements. So again, a person may not be great at all of these things, but I think we can all say, I can do some of those things, right? At some point in my interaction with this young person, I can show them that I can be trusted and that I can trust them. I can help them feel known and valued. Because when you do, you're letting them know that they matter, that they're important. That then feeds those assets. It prevents the vulnerabilities. Challenge growth. All right, so as a track and field coach, since I heard y'all say, or you heard me say, or coach in general, challenge growth is probably one of the easiest ones for folks. Teachers too. Teachers are always like, yes. And students in schools often say that this is the one area that they feel like that their school or their teachers are doing really good at. So I'll talk about this, and I'll talk to you about a little about the shadow side of this. Push me to keep getting better. What does that mean? That you expect my best. Expect me to live up to my potential. That you push me to go further. I feel stretched. You hold me accountable, insist that I take responsibility for my actions, and help me to learn from my mistakes and setbacks. So in some spaces, as I mentioned, sports, for example, this is one where young people feel like, oh yeah, I'm experiencing a lot of challenge growth. However, if challenge growth isn't done in a way in which care or support is received, then it's really you're just kind of pushing a kid to the extremes. So that's what I say, like the shadow side, and I'll be doing some research in the future around what is the shadow side of challenge growth, because on the positive end, challenge growth is amazing because it's saying that I know you can do better. This is where grit and resiliency are really fostered when someone says, okay, you're at this stage and I think you can get to here. And I can push you and I can motivate you and I can give you what you need to get there. Lots of growth for young people happens through the challenge of the growth. But they can also be weakened and harmed. Because if, for example, push me to go further, but I'm already at my limits. Because they'll say, yeah, you pushed me to go further, and then I broke. And I actually did some work with elite athletes around this idea, and that's when I realized the shadow side, because they talked about how they were pushed and lived to their potential, but they weren't talking about it in a positive way. So thinking about how to be that balance with this one in particular. And then providing support. Help me complete the tasks and achieve my goals. Young people need so much support. And this is scaffolding, right? This is giving them that leg up that they need to get to the next level of the ladder. Guide me through the hard situations and systems. Build my confidence to take charge of my life. Stand up for me when I need it. Put in place limits that help keep me on track. That's that set boundaries. And I know someone, in the keynote had a question like, hey, what are we talking about with boundaries? Boundaries is a form of support. It is. Helps keep them on track. And I'll put on my clinical hat real quick and say that when I did work as a therapist, one of the things that when we talk about providing support and setting boundaries and all that was so critical. And when they would come to me with something that they've done that they knew was a deviation from our plan or what wasn't going to help them or harm them, part of my role and responsibility as their therapist was to not judge them. And that's in my face, my body language, deep in my heart. I should not judge them. And when they experience that, and when anyone in a therapeutic setting experiences that non-judgment, they feel safe. They feel like it's okay for them to be vulnerable. But when our young people don't feel like they can come to us because they know that reaction, they're going to get that look, they're going to get that finger point, they're going to get that punishment, that's when they say, okay, well, I'm going to keep this to myself. So I think a lot of what we experience in our young people not wanting to come to adults is both a reflection of perhaps their understanding of what we intend, but also what we are giving out in terms of our energy and our body language and our expressions. But we want them to know that we're there to support them. So really think about, what does that look like? Share power. Like I mentioned before, sharing power is a hard one for folks. But I think it could be really easy. It really can. I promise you it could be easy to share power. As simple as respect me. Take me seriously and treat me fairly. Include me. Involve me in decisions that affect me. Collaborate. Work with me to solve problems and reach goals. Let me lead. Give me a chance to take action and lead. There's a reason why students and young people who are in leadership positions are far less vulnerable than those who are not. One, they often have the self-confidence, yes, to go and to pursue leadership positions and things like that, but often because the adults are giving them space to speak into what matters to them. But leaders aren't just those individuals that were selected or voted or whatever. All young people have an opportunity or should have an opportunity to lead in the spaces in which they have strength in, to be given an opportunity to share their insights. And that can be done in so many different ways depending on your context. And expand possibilities. This is one of my favorite ones because it connects me with people and places that broaden my world. For marginalized youth, for traumatized youth, the expansion of possibilities opens up their world so much because they probably have operated within small circles, small spaces that have confined them, that have limited their thinking about what their future could look like. So someone coming in and saying, I see so much for you, that disrupts the vulnerability, that disrupts the marginalization. Because if they're connected to you and you believe in them and you can see that future, then they can begin to see that future too. And when you can help them connect the dots, so as I mentioned earlier, somebody who has an art skill, and you're like, you know what, I'm just gonna, look, I went to the Five Below, found these great markers here. Go draw. That will mean the world to them because you see something in them, you are willing to invest in it. And I'm not saying go and spend all your money at Five Below, but I'm saying there are ways in which you can do that make sense in your context. So, but sometimes you just got to really think about it. So help me see the new possibilities for my future, expose me to new ideas and experiences, introduce me to people who help me grow. That last one is connected to this idea of social capital. Who you are connected to is actually a network of a whole lot of people, that when you can connect your young person to any one of those within your network, then their network expands. Because again, vulnerable youth they're often looking for someone who can connect them to something. And if someone comes in with a predatory mindset who wants to harm a child and says, hey, I can get you access to this, because they'll lie, right? I can get you access to this. But what if someone who's truthful, who can get them access to that same thing without any kind of exchange or anything that's predatory? Think about how that can change their world, because that's often what they're looking for, is someone who can help them. All right, here's a moment. Think about, of the 5 elements that we've been talking about, which of the 5 elements you feel come most naturally for you? Which of those you think comes most naturally for you? Think for a second. I'll give you a moment, and then I'll ask you to share. Or maybe I'll do a show of hands. Yeah, let's do that. All right. Express care. Who thinks that one comes the easiest for them? Oh, you're all so caring. I love that. How about challenge growth? Teachers, coaches? Yeah, awesome. Provide support. Nice. How about share power? Okay, a couple. I told you that's a hard one. And expand possibilities. Awesome. So these ones that come most naturally to you, those are probably the ones that your young people are experiencing. They'll probably agree, be like, yes. They read all of them. It's like, yeah, I definitely think that about her. I definitely think that about him. That's what they do really well. So your relational ecosystem. So what we're thinking about, your relational ecosystem, is these aspects of you that we want to help broaden, right? So build your approach is to look at 2 different things. What is your mindset? How do you think about young people? How do you think about the work that you do? And then how do you apply it? That's the actions. So these are the ingredients that kind of lead to the development of your approach, your relational approach. So mindsets, how you think; actions are what you do. So within your mindset, how can you be more intentional, inclusive, equitable? These are all things that we've been talking about, but being really thinking at a few levels deeper of how can I make for sure the young people that I'm reaching, that I'm doing so with intentionality, that I'm trying my best to bring in as many young people as possible. And that doesn't have to be all of them all at once, but it means being able to express and with as many young people as I can. And that equitable factor is being sure to be what each vulnerable youth needs. If a young person is more vulnerable than another, being able to step in and do a little bit more for that young person than another. Now, your actions, they're formal and informal actions. Some things are very, very like, this is specifically what needs to be done. And then there's other things that are kind of more felt, right? So going back to this whole diagram. As I mentioned before, you are one person. Perhaps there's one other, but for a young person. And then look at that ecosystem, how much it can broaden when more people are focused on thinking through their mindset, their actions. Their relational network expands. When you think about the spaces in which you operate in, your relational culture of that space feeds the relational climate. And they go back and forth. So I'm going to go back. Can I go back? Yeah, because I would think you want to see this. So remember the relational climate there, right? The community context, the supporting structures. Go back to this one. The climate creates the culture creates the climate. So those are in a reciprocal feeding loop. So think about, what is the climate? In the spaces that you're operating, are you preparing a place and a space for young people to be their best selves? Are you thinking about how to diffuse and to stretch each person so that they're all able to wear that cape together? So this doesn't have to rely solely on one person. And sometimes there are relational champions in spaces where you're like, oh, that person's really great. All the kids love to be in their classroom. And so some people are like, oh, well, if that person's in the building, let them do it. It's like, well, no, how do we all carry that weight? And that includes, in some systems, that includes literally the janitor, the bus driver. At one of my son's school, I watched this wonderful crossing guard give fist bumps and high fives and smiles in literally 30 seconds that it takes from a kid to walk from one side of the street to the other. And they're seeing him in the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, and I'm like, that is a relational champion. And he probably said 2 words and 1 fist bump, and kids walked away with a smile and started and ended their day on a relational high. Sometimes it's literally that simple to see a kid. So I'll end us with this. I was doing some weird stuff, but this is also in the handouts you have, to think about, what is your commitment? What can you, after hearing not just the things that I've been sharing, but the things that many folks have shared today, what can you walk away saying, what am I going to be committed to do? And I would expand that beyond just what you're committed to do to build developmental relationships, but also include, as we've talked about, to increase the strengths we want to see in young people, to decrease their vulnerabilities, to disrupt these systems that are trying to harm kids. You can fill in that with any blank, but really think about by what date you're willing to do what? Fist bump a kid, build a whole new curriculum for young people to engage in. Maybe it's just to, commit to being a new mentor. What will that be? Who are you going to connect with? Who's the person that you think of, or the people that you're thinking of when you think about what your action will be? And then today or tomorrow, I'm going to invite someone to join you in that effort. Who's that person you want to join you? Who do you want to expand your cape, and you want to make for sure they are under that cape with you? Who is that? So I'll give you a moment. Think that through. Also in your packet, there's some other resources around intentionality. If you want to go deeper and see, well, what are the areas I want to grow more deeply? That's in there. There's some other resources. We'd love your feedback. We have a wonderful resource hub on our website that I think we have a link for. No. But if you go to searchinstitute.org, we have lots of resources. We don't want you to feel, I love that, it's my timer. We don't want you to feel alone. We have lots of resources. You can connect with us in different ways. I'm so happy to have been able to share with you, and earlier today and now, and thank you so much. And although my time is up now, I'll be around in whatever break we have if anybody has any questions.